Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for part 2 of how to configure and leverage the new features of Vicon's Valerus version 21.1. Now, being an open webinar to many people, we're going to give just about 60 seconds for those last few folks that are logging in right now to get logged in and get settled. But for you that are already with us, great chance for you to grab some note-taking material, maybe something to drink. Find yourself a comfortable position in your chair, and I will lead you through this webinar with some really good and important information in it. We should take somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes, including our Q&A session at the end, and hopefully we'll impart some necessary information for you that you're going to be able to go out and leverage yourselves. 30 seconds more, we'll go ahead and get started. While we're waiting for those folks to join, let me just go ahead and remind you that at the end or conclusion of today's webinar, there will be a survey that will pop up on your screen if you stay connected. We'd really appreciate if you'd fill that out for us. It's short and sweet, about 6 to 8 questions, and that will help us better service you when we do these webinars. Also, you'll be receiving an email within 24 to 48 hours after this webinar ends, and that will contain a link to the recorded version of the webinar that we'll put up on our YouTube channel. While you're there at our YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe to our channel, and that way you'll immediately receive notifications of any new videos we post. But in order to receive those notifications, you have to click on the little alarm bell and choose to receive those notifications. All right, I think it's time for us to go ahead and get started. My name is George Umansky. I'm the Director of Learning Development here at Vicon. And again, I want to thank you for joining us today for part 2 of how to configure and leverage the new features of Vicon's Valerus version 21.1. Our agenda for today will include a quick review of all the new features, and then we'll spend time talking about integration frameworks, the access list, dashboard enhancements, and our snapshot tool, and of course, all the cost advantages that these items bring for you. And we'll end up with some questions and answers. All the new features in Valerus 21.1 were advanced alarm management and client performance indicator, integration frameworks, the access list, health dashboard enhancements, and the snapshot tool. The first two we covered in our part 1 webinar, and today we're going to cover the remaining items. So let's start off with integration frameworks. What is it? Why is it important? And is it the same thing as an SDK, Software Developers Kit? Well, it's not something that I can actually show you, something that we're going to have to talk about. But realistically, the integration frameworks is simply a powerful tool that allows integration with partner systems. That includes things today like access control and license plate recognition. A framework was created in Valerus to integrate access control systems. Now, today we have integration with VAX, but that's not to say that we couldn't have integration with any other access control system. Because let's face it, access control systems all work alike for the most part. And what we've done is we've created the framework to do that integration. And that means that we don't have to send out a software developer kit or charge for a software developer kit to go to a third party, and then their engineering team and our engineering team have to work together to build what some people call it a tight integration. It's very specific to that one third party manufacturer and us. Instead, we use a framework that allows virtually any access control system to integrate with Valerus with just a little work on our end. We also have a framework that was created for integration with LPR systems. And today we've introduced the Neural Labs LPR integration in the server version, and very soon, close to probably mid-December, or first part of the new year, we'll introduce the edge-based Neural Labs, which I gave a sneak peek of during the Part 1 webinar. Frameworks allows adding and correlating the partner system data with the appropriate video channels. It supports adding icons on Valerus maps to mark partner resources, and it helps us define alarms and rules based on events provided via the third-party system. So that's what a framework is. Now, if I was going to try to show you what a framework is, I would have to say it starts off like this. We have to create a foundation, just like you do for a house. And then you're going to have to pour that foundation and get it nice and level. Now, that's Valerus. Then we start building or framing out the house. And as we frame out the house further, we start adding more structure. And eventually, we get to the point where we begin to stub things out. Electrical drops, plumbing. In today's houses in new construction, we could have network drops in every room. We might throw in some optic or fiber cables throughout the house, coaxial cable as well. It all depends, but the framework, or what we've done in Valerus, is we've sort of stubbed out the house. And maybe we add another floor and we stub out that floor with the same features: electrical, plumbing, cable, fiber, etc. And once that's done, then we have a house. And in this house right now, we have two frameworks, one for access control, one for LPR. But what if next week, maybe we need to do integration with some gunshot detection type systems? Well, we're going to go back and we're going to add another framework, because we were smart enough that when we were building those walls, we put the infrastructure in there to add more things. And that's really what an integration framework is. Most of our competitors will use an SDK. We have an SDK available if we needed to do that, but we find the frameworks allows us to integrate quicker, and in actuality, we do the majority of the work. The next new feature I'm going to show you is actually a cybersecurity enhancement to Valerus 21.1, and it's called Access List. An access list is implemented if you want to restrict access to specific client PCs. If you want to do this, then you need to create the access list. And once you start using the access list, it's important to understand that any client that would need to connect is going to need to be in that access list. Now, you can restrict access by three different variables: the client PC's IP address, its MAC address, or its Valerus ID. That ID can be found under Settings, About, Valerus ID, and I'll show that to you in just a moment. Now, once you implement this list, again, all machines that require access need to be added to the list. But it's important to note that it will never block, the access list will never block the built-in admin account from any PC, regardless of whether or not that machine is in the access list or not. This is a sort of a built-in, I don't want to call it a backdoor, but a failsafe, so that you don't accidentally lock yourself completely out of the system. So let's take a look at the Valerus web client, and I'll show you what this looks like and how you actually implement it. So from my web client, I'm going to go ahead and click on Configuration. And in Configuration, I'm going to come down to System, and the last item in System is the Access List. Now, when I open the Access List up, you see that it's empty. And when it's empty, it means it's not being used. But the moment I put one item in that list, then the access list is active and will be used. So how do I do this? Well, I can click on Add MAC, IP, or ID. And I'm going to add my machine using my Valerus ID. So before I even click on that, I need to get my Valerus ID. I'm going to go over to my admin account. I'm going to click on About, and here is the Valerus ID. I can go ahead and highlight it, right-click it, and copy it. And then I can close this window. So now when I come back to add MAC IP or ID, for the identifier, I have to choose which identifier I'm using. I'm going to use my Valerus ID. Under the details section, I'm going to paste my Valerus ID in its place. My description can be whatever you want it to be, my laptop. And any remarks that you might want to add, you can add as well. And the status is that you want this on or off. So right now it's on, and I'm going to click on Save. And now I have an access list. So at this moment, any other client PC that goes and attempts to try to log into this Valerus system would be locked out, unless they were logging in using the default or built-in admin account. So when you are ready to implement the access list, you should gather all that information ahead of time so that you can go ahead and add the other client machines. So I could go in now and I could click on Add. And for the identifier, maybe this time I'm going to use an IP address. And then I need to put that IP address in, like so. And then I could put in a description. I could put in a remark. I can leave the status of, yes, I want it to be part of my access list. And I click on Save. And now I have 2 clients in my access list. And I continue to do this until I have all the clients that I want in there listed. And of course, you can always add or remove or even disable one of those machines at any time. Let's say that this particular machine was one of my traveling security personnel and his laptop got stolen. So I want to go ahead and disable the account. I don't necessarily want to completely remove it just yet, but I want to disable it. So I'll go ahead and select it, and then I'll go over to the property side and I'll change the status to no, and then I'll save my work. So at this point, this particular client PC no longer has access. However, if the machine is recovered and everything is good, well, then I can just add it back in. So the important thing to remember is with no access list, any machine with credentials and knowledge of the login, IP address, etc., can have access to the system. However, once the access list is implemented, only the machines that are in the access list can access the system. One caveat to that, though, is, again, the default or built-in admin account can always log in from any machine using our web client. Restoring access to a machine that was previously disabled is as simple as selecting it and changing the status back to yes and saving your work. Also, if you want to fully delete a specific client PC, you can select it and then click on Delete. Are you sure? Yes. And now that machine is completely out of the list. The next new feature that we're going to take a look at is our Enhanced Health Dashboard, or some people just refer to it as the dashboard. Here you'll see that we can view statistical and diagnostic information to assess the system health. We can detect potential system issues to ensure uninterrupted operations, and we can increase system protection through improved cybersecurity. You'll also find that there are many new tools, alerts, and visualizations in the newly enhanced dashboard. Now, there's so many different sections in the dashboard, rather than trying to even talk about it in a PowerPoint, I think it's best that we just go to the dashboard and we'll take a look at all the different sections and see what kind of information is provided to us. From our Valerus web client, we can access the dashboard right here, but before I click on it, I want you to notice the red triangle that's located above the word dashboard. Now, if everything was okay, we would see the dashboard tab and there would be no triangle, no indication above it at all. If there was a warning in the system, it would be a yellow triangle with the exclamation point. And when there's an error, we'll see the red triangle with the exclamation point. Now, obviously, I've introduced some warnings and errors into the system so that I can show them to you. But that's your first indication, visual indication, that there's something that needs to be looked at. So let's go ahead and click on the dashboard. And before we get into the different sections, I want you to take a look at the left-hand side of the screen. And first thing I want you to notice is that I can expand this from icons to icons with names. We have the Home module, the Application Server module, the Recording Server module, a Cameras module, our Internet Gateways module, our Cybersecurity module, and Activity Mapping. And we can see now that we actually have a warning from our Cybersecurity module. Now, this is not the access list that we learned about earlier. This is something different. And we have a error coming from the Cameras module. Well, we'll get to those in order. Now, you can collapse this here and use just the icons, or you can leave it expanded so you can see the different module names. In the Home module, we get a quick view of each of the sub-modules. So here's my application server, here's my NVRs, here's my cameras, here's my internet gateways, and here's my cybersecurity. The only thing that we don't see directly from here is the activity mapping. From the home screen, you can actually get more detail on each of the modules, and that's really no different than coming over here and clicking on that specific module. So you'll see if I click on more details for the application server, which is showing no warnings and no errors, when I click on more details, my tab actually moves itself to the application server. And here in this module, you'll find two tabs. We have our health monitoring tab. That's why some people refer to it as the health dashboard, but it is really a lot more than just health monitoring. And this can be used by either the end user or the integrator to monitor one or many systems. So for the integrators out there, think of this as a maintenance service that you could actually offer to your customers. Assuming that you have system access, you could actually monitor their dashboards. From the health monitoring tab, there's really no information here because there are no errors and warnings. But if I go to the statistics tab, I can get a little bit more information about what this application server is doing. Now, we know that the application server is sort of like the brain of the system, right? So it controls our NVR. So we have an NVR and camera distribution tab in here. And it's showing me that I have one recording server or one NVR, and here's its IP address. Is actually telling me that it's an NVR and that it has 4 cameras assigned to it. Now, if I go over to the cameras module, it's telling me that there are 4 different cameras. Now, that's system-wide camera distribution by model, 4 different camera models that are here, and the different camera names. Now, one of these is my IP simulator, which is actually about 18 cameras, but I have 3 other cameras assigned here as well. I can also see the RAM usage of my application server. I can see my CPU usage. Not only do I see it on like a gas gauge, but I also have a graphic display as well. I can do it by the hour, or I could switch it to a by the day mode. So you can see right now it's very high because I'm running it. I've got my NVR running. I've got my webinars running. All kinds of stuff going on right now. But in any case, you can obviously visualize these graphs. But if you're one of those people that really likes Excel, you can actually export that data in an Excel file format, or you can actually export it in HTML. In any case, I can do that, but most likely you would do it in Excel, take it into Excel, and then you can manipulate the data in any way that you want to create different graphs and so forth that you want. And you're going to see that capability to export to HTML or export to Excel in virtually every module. Here's my CPU usage. And here are some newer modules that have been added into the dashboard. In this case, I can see the status of my SQL Server RAM, my SQL Server CPU usage, open alarms in the system. This is an important one, and you can see that this is a gauge that actually goes up to 1,000. Let's face it, folks, if you have 1,000 open alarms in your system, you are either a huge procrastinator or you've got way too many alarms programmed in your system that are triggering constantly for whatever reason, and they need to be handled. I can also see my video export space for my application server, which is where the export location is. Now, a lot of people don't realize that there are some limitations when you're doing exports. For instance, a single user can only have 4 exports saved on the application server at any time. It's just important to remember that after you do an export and you download it, if everything's good with it, go back and delete it. So this is not just for one user, this would be for all users. And we can see we've got a pretty large amount of space available here. And I've got about 681 gigs of free space there as well to do exports in. But up here in this section under exports, this is where you can see any exports that are ready for you to download. And then of course, once you download it, once you create an export, even after you've downloaded it, it will still be there. And then you can also delete it once you're done with it. So that's the application server. It's a very, very busy one because it has all of its, let's call them children, involved. Let's go ahead and click on recording servers and see what information is there. So first of all, in health monitoring, we have no information because we have no warnings and we have no errors. So we're healthy, no warnings, no errors. If we go to statistics, we're going to see a list of our different system NVRs. And in this case, I have just one. It shows me the last time that it actually started up, how much storage is assigned to it. And you see, I don't have a huge amount of storage, and how many channels I actually have. Now I can go ahead and click on the NVR and I can get some critical information for it, some things that might help me tweak certain things in my system. I can see the different models of cameras that I have. In this case, I have 4 different models. I can see my storage distribution by channel. So what camera is using up the greatest amount of my storage? Now, obviously, once you fill your storage up, remember, you start to overwrite it. But it's showing me that currently on this hard drive, what cameras are occupying the most storage. And if I have one camera, let's say that's occupying a huge amount of storage, maybe it's a high resolution camera, maybe it's at a very high frame rate, but nonetheless, it may be something that I want to look at. Maybe I want to throttle it back a little bit. Maybe it's not one of my most critical cameras, whatever it happens to be. And again, don't forget that you have the ability to export this information and import it, say, into Excel and create your own graphs. Here we have the average recording bandwidth daily. So we can either look at it today or we can look at it over the week and see what kind of recording we were doing during the week. And you can see mine drops off sometimes because there are times where my computer is off. And then standard drive system, it's going to tell me how many channels I actually have. In this case, I have 21 channels. And it will also give me my bandwidth consumption for recording, or throughput to drive is really what we should call it. And you can see that for both standard drives or RAID drives. Now, I don't have a RAID system installed, so there's no need for me to click on that. Again, I can see my RAM and CPU usage for this system. And because I'm running an all-in-one, you can see the numbers are basically all the same. You can also see NVR latency. And this module right here is a new module, which is our hard drive smart status. So depending on the model of hard drive that's being used, most hard drives today have a smart monitoring system. And if there is such a system on a drive that's being used, then we can actually monitor it for errors. That smart system, depending on the drive manufacturer, they can all be a little bit different, but they basically look for any errors in the drive, bad sectors, etc. And when they get a warning, then we'll get a warning here as well. So right now, my status for this drive is okay, but if there was a problem noted here, then certainly I would get an error or warning, I should say. I would get a warning indication for a problem, or if it was a hard drive failure, I would get an error indication. So that's what we can see in the recording servers. Now, if we move on to cameras, we can see for the first time in the health monitoring tab, I have an error message. And the error is that this particular camera is not connected. There is a communication failure. And that's because I have the camera offline right now. Now, if I wanted to check the status of the camera myself, I could click on device configuration, which would try to open up the web page. But like I said, I know I have the camera disconnected, so the web page is not going to open. Now, when I go into statistics, it's going to tell me about all of my cameras. It's going to tell me what NVR they're assigned to, what recording method they're using, what's the earliest recording that's available, what's the latest recording that's available, what's the recording time and expected limit. So you see here I have 2 and first in, first out. Now, that number 2, where did that come from? It's a really important question if you want to have an idea of how your system's performing based on your expectations. And when we helped design your system, we determined how much storage you would need for your cameras operating at these specifications across however many NVRs. We set up the storage. Now, I'm going to leave the dashboard for just a second. I want to go to configuration. In configuration, I'm then going to go to network devices, NVRs, and for each NVR, you had to set up the storage drives, right? Which is where you assign the hard drives. But there is a section here that says expected retention. And this is where you would put in the number of days that you actually expected to get retention from the system. So that number of days will correlate back to the dashboard in the statistics for this section right here. And then when you look at the dates, you'd be able to see exactly what's going on. Now, my retention is really, really small because I have a small amount of hard drive space and I'm running all my cameras at 30 frames per second at maximum resolution. So I'm eating through that hard drive pretty quickly. I'm just overwriting. But what we can see is that the estimated retention is less than a day, but I wanted 2 days as an example. So that would tell me that either I'm not running the cameras the way I expected to, maybe I'm doing a higher resolution, higher frame rate, etc. Whatever the case is, that's sort of an indication that you might need to change something in your system. Now, I just want to show you real quick, if I go back to my configuration tab and I go back to my NVRs, and I'm going to change this 2 days to say 5 days, and I'm going to save that. So now when I go back to my dashboard and I take a look at the statistics here, you see now it's showing me 5 days so that I can better compare that to the estimated retention. And that's pretty much it for the cameras. The most important thing in this case is that this is where we're getting our red triangle error. We have one error, and that's what prompted the red triangle here above the dashboard. It's always going to show me the worst case scenario. In this case, any error will cause the red triangle. If there's no errors, but there's a warning somewhere in the system, I'll have the yellow triangle. The next module is the Internet Gateway module. Now, I actually don't have one. So there's nothing here, and obviously then there's no statistics either. This is the Internet Gateway that you would set up if you want to expose your system outside of your local network for remote access. Next, we're going to take a look at the Cybersecurity tab. And remember that we have the yellow triangle indicator here. That's a warning. And let's take a close look at what's available to us in cybersecurity. Now, up till now, we've seen initially 2 tabs, health monitoring and statistics. But in cybersecurity, we have health monitoring, statistics, users, and devices. In the health monitoring is where I'm at right now, and it has 2 sub-tabs, users and devices. Now, what it's telling me at this point is that there are some user warnings in this case. One of those warnings is a default password alert, and it's for me, the administrator, and it says that I'm still using the system default password. Very important that one of the first things that you do after you get your system set up, especially if it's exposed to the internet in any way, shape, or form, but even if it's not, it's so easy to go out to the internet and figure out what the default username and password is for the system administrator, who could basically delete the entire system. So certainly it's very important that you change the password for the built-in administrator account. The second thing that we're seeing here is a failed login alert. And it says that the user's name was Stan, and that we don't even know what role that he has, but it says that he failed to log into this system 3 times. Now, if Stan's an actual user in the system, it could be that Stan forgot his password. Maybe I need to check with Stan. Or maybe it's not Stan, and it's somebody pretending to be Stan, and he's trying to figure out what Stan's password is. In any case, that's a problem that I'm going to need to deal with, and I'm being given a warning to take a look at it. Now, you can choose not to see these particular types of warnings if you don't want to. I don't know why you wouldn't want to, but I do want to show you real quick that if we go to our user account and then our user settings, there is a section in here where you can choose what notifications you want to see or don't want to see. And it's located right here. It's called Dashboard Notifications. So right now, all notifications are on, which include password alerts, failed logins, or access list violations. Access list violation would be somebody who's not, or not somebody, but a machine that's not on the access list and somebody trying to log in from that machine. You can turn any one of those on or off, or all off, or obviously all on. Again, I don't see why you'd want to do that. These are all cybersecurity things. I want to know about them. Under devices, this is where you would see any issues from the access list that we learned about at the beginning of today's webinar. If an attempt was made to log in from an unauthorized machine. In the statistics section, we can simply see who's logged in, when they logged in, and how long they've been logged in for. Let me go back over to the health monitoring section for just a second. I'm going to go back to the users tab. And let's say that I'm okay with whatever messages I saw here. I can click on actions and I can clear the message. Notice when I mouse over it, it'll say clear message. I'm just clearing the message out. We'll go back to the devices section now. And again, nothing in here. But if I go to the statistics, it shows me my login time. And there is an action section here. And one of the things that you can do here as a person that has the permissions to do so, and since I'm the system administrator, I do. If I saw someone that has been logged in here for 5 straight days, which is not a norm in our environment, well, I can click on their line, choose actions, and I can actually force log out that user from the system. So it could be that somebody logged in and they left the machine on and they went home or they went on vacation or whatever. It could be a remote machine and somebody's just left it on somewhere. If there's no reason for someone to be logged on for whatever reason, or even an extended period of time, you have the option, if you have the permission to do so, to force log them out. So very important information here that you can look at. And reminder, we can always export this information as well. So that's the cybersecurity tab. All, again, very, very good information. Now, the last module that we're going to talk about is the activity mapping module. Inside of this module, you're going to get a visual representation of activity that has occurred in the system. It's taking the audit logs and turning them into, instead of just data, something that you can visualize. Now, I want you to notice at the top of the screen, we're in the month of October, and these are the different items that are being visualized for us. These are what we call hashtag searches. I'll show you what the hashtag is in just a couple of minutes. We can filter by monitoring, search, configuration, dashboard, and alarm, and each of them has their own color. So if I look at this map, I can see the things that were done on different days. Maybe I want to look at the previous month. So in September, I can get an activity map of everything that has taken place in the system. Now, for instance, I might sit here and look at September the 19th, and I would say, wow, somebody was in configuration in the system. I'm the system administrator. I feel like maybe I should be the only one in configuration. I don't think I've even given anyone else the ability to go into configuration. So I might want to check that out. I want to do a deeper dive. So I simply move my mouse to configuration and click on it, and this will take me to my search window for audit logs for a hashtag configuration search of the audit log for that day, September the 19th. Notice this is a 24-hour search for that specific day. A hashtag search can only be for a single day. Now, the information presented here is date and time, user, system name, and the actions and commands that a user actually went in and touched. Now, in this case, I'm actually the only user on my system, and you can see that everything was done by me. Maybe I realized that I went into work that day or I accessed the system remotely. But what if I saw another user was actually in the system? How can I see the other users? Well, you can scroll through the list for sure, but you can also sort the list by clicking on the word user. It will sort it in ascending or descending order. What I can't do is I can't do it up here. I cannot filter out for a specific username. And that's one of the features of the hashtag search. In any case, if you want to understand exactly what a hashtag search is, because you can do them yourself, in this window, you'll notice that there's a question mark here, and it tells us that during a normal audit log search, you can enter any word into the search line and perform a text search of the audit log. You can also search or filter your search by date and time, user, and PC. So you can actually set the from date and the to date, what PC, what user, etc. But if you enter one of the following hashtags, which is hashtag monitoring, configuration, search, dashboard, or alarm, you can only search the one day, and you cannot filter by PC name or username. Once you're done looking at the audit logs for that particular activity that you saw in your activity mapping, you can simply use your browser back button to go back to the activity mapping module. Now it's going to return to the current date, and you could go on and do another deep dive if you wanted to. Maybe I'll go into search for October the 6th. And now I can see all the searches that were done. Who did them, on what machine, and at what time. Very, very simple, but very, very powerful tool, because let's face it, this visualization gives me the ability to know, other than the normal standard things that might take place, if any one of my users are delving into parts of the system that they ought not to be delving into, or just to see how the system is being used on a day-to-day basis. So this is a completely new module inside of the dashboard. I hope that you'll find it very, very useful. We have one more new feature to discuss today from Valerus 21.1, and that's the snapshot tool. It's been updated to add a quick and easy method to update all of your reference images. Let's take a quick look at how this is done. From the Valerus client, I'm simply going to go to Configuration, And then I'm going to go to the resources section and I'm going to choose my video channels. Now I'm going to pick a camera here to work with. So I'm just going to use my 4K bullet camera. And I'm looking here at a live image from that camera. And then this here is a reference snapshot. Now you might notice that there's some difference between the live image and the reference image. It looks to me like the camera in the live view has definitely been tilted down a little bit and also moved a bit to the left. Now that could be because I moved the camera. Maybe I wanted it to look at something different. Or it could be that somehow the camera mysteriously got moved. But in any case, it lets me know that the camera is not current to the reference image that I set for this camera, using this feature right here called Take a Snapshot. Now when I click on Take Snapshot Now, assuming that the camera is actually where I want it to be, I'm going to be offered two choices. Take a snapshot for just this camera or update all the cameras in my system at the same time. Now certainly we would only want to do this when we've gone through and we've checked all those different cameras, or maybe we've just completed our initial installation and I want to have a reference image of the whole system. It saves you from having to go from camera to camera to camera to camera and taking a snapshot from each one. So I'll simply click on All Resources and I click on OK. And at this point in time, the system will update all of the snapshots throughout the system. It's just that easy. Now we've covered a lot of information today. I'm sure it's a bit of an overload, but remember, you can always go back and watch this webinar again from our YouTube channel. Let's talk about some of the cost advantages that we might find from all of these new features. So starting off with the access list, it's certainly an increased level of cybersecurity, and it should help us prevent any kind of a data breach using Valerus as an entry point into the network. The enhanced dashboard had many new and cool features in it, and certainly it could be used as a potential revenue stream for a system integrator that wants to do proactive monitoring of their customer systems and also provide preventative maintenance. I mean, imagine an integrator that actually shows up at the customer site to tell them that a camera is down or that a hard drive needs to be replaced before the customer even realizes it. You can also use the enhanced dashboard to know who is accessing what and when within the system. And that's certainly some critical information to know. And you can also use it to determine if your system is being used or is performing as needed. And that would be a combination of a couple of different sections, but certainly the activity mapping and the statistics that we can find under each of the sections. The snapshot tool, we can quickly determine if camera position issues are occurring, whether somebody's moving cameras or something's running into our cameras. We don't know what it is, but if there's a problem, then we need to figure out what's causing it. Because let's face it, cameras typically don't move on their own. And let's not forget about our integration frameworks. This is our investment into your future so that when the time comes where you need to integrate with a third-party system, we should have the framework in place to make that integration for you quick, simple, and easy. All these features are included in the version 21.1 upgrade with the UPP. So now it's time for a few questions and answers. We're pretty much at our full-time capacity here. So let me just take a quick look into the questions pane and see if there are any questions to answer right now. But rest assured that within about the next 24 to 48 hours, we're going to send a follow-up email to each of you, along with all questions and the answers that were asked by anybody in the crowd. So I see one question here that's actually kind of important. So let's talk about this one. The question is, do all of the features come with all the different tiers within Valerus? So you know in Valerus we have Core, Pro, and Enterprise. The answer to that question can be found in the release notes for Valerus 21.1, But I have a document here that I put together recently. Let me see if I can grab it real quick. Here we go. So starting on the left-hand side, alarms management, which we covered in part 1, is included with the enterprise level tier, and it has some slightly limited functionality in the pro tier. The computer access list that we covered today is included with enterprise and pro, and the integration framework that we covered today is included with enterprise. Dashboard enhancements, the reference snapshot updates, and the performance monitor is included in all tiers. Folks, I really appreciate you joining us for today's webinar. We have more webinars coming up. You should receive an email notification of the different webinars that are going to be provided. But keep an eye out, keep joining us, and remember, once I close this webinar, if you stay on the line, you will be directed to a survey that you can fill out. You can give us some feedback. We certainly appreciate that. Have a great day, and thanks again for joining us.